Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Your Town Matters. I'm joined today by the Mayor of the Town of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson. Thanks for being here today, Brad.
Always a pleasure.
I want to start off today's episode by talking about the Wharf and Market Square restoration project. There are 5 options that we as a town can look at and give our feedback on. Can you walk us through what those 5 options are? I know there was a public consultation last night at the arena where dozens of locals came out to give their feedback, but for those who didn't make it, can you walk us through what some of the options are and ultimately what's the price range?
Absolutely. So there is, to your point, 5 main options. I'd almost say 4 because one of them just isn't feasible. But I guess before I get to the options, a lot of people actually are asking, didn't we already do this? And the truth is we did. So the previous council looked at, I think at that time it was only 4 options primarily, and they did select an option. But a lot has changed since then, which has made us go back and do the consultation. Primarily, the option that they selected, we started the process, so there was approved funding associated with that, but there were certain things that the municipality had to do. Very important things. There was a certain study that was needed to understand what birds nest at the wharf, and that was a part of getting the approved funding, but also important things like First Nations consultation. All this stuff took time. And when that all happened, COVID obviously hit us, and we see with inflation and costs right now what happened. So the cost of the wharf basically skyrocketed about $2 million, and that extra amount, the $2 million, would have had to have been 100% paid for by the residents of St. Andrews. So what the municipality did is, versus incurring extra $2 million in debt, is they went to the other levels of government, had to reapply. And I'm pleased to say, unofficially, the town of St. Andrews was successful at getting the incremental amount for the extra $2 million, meaning our share would be, less than $500,000 of that. So we saved the taxpayer of St. Andrews over $1.5 million. But now that we have the money, there's the consultation still. Why are you consulting again? Well, municipal reform happened. So you've got Shamcook Bayside, now part of St. Andrews. Last time consultation happened, they weren't. So although they could have been involved in the process, probably a lot of residents weren't because they weren't paying for it. Well, now they are, and I don't think it'd be fair for new residents to join your community and you make a decision based on something they weren't consulted in the past. So we said, hey, let's just pause the brakes here. We're doing 3 sessions. One, as you mentioned, was already completed. We have 2 more, one in Bayside, another one will be at the arena in the upcoming weeks. And we wanted to hear from the public on the 5 options. So the 5 options, to answer your question now, they do range from rehabilitation, so just fixing the wharf right now as it stands. I kind of want to just put that one aside, and I don't want to skew it, but the reality is that the funding that we received from the provincial and federal government was based on climate change and having an action plan around it. Just fixing it does not qualify. So it means the municipality would have to pay the entire portion of that, and that would actually be the highest option. It would cost us the most to fix something that might be only good for 10 to 15 years versus these other options. And the other options, infill, which was probably the most controversial one last time, infill berm, which is basically armor stone, really just building the approach to the wharf. It's just the beginning of the wharf, not the whole wharf. Filling it with infill, that is the cheapest option. It's by cheap, it's still about $6 million. But it's also the most durable. It lasts the longer. And if we need to add on and climate change in the future, it's the cheapest option because you can just put more armor stone on top of it and build it up. So from an engineering perspective, it's probably the recommended, but the visual is what the other options seemed to have last time. Got a little bit more positive public feedback. Steel, which is a commonly used material in wharf, a steel pile option is about 8.2 million, so you're paying 2 million more, but again, a nice durable structure. And then precast concrete is about 7.9. So you've got the other options, steel and concrete, pretty close in price. And then the last option, which I don't believe I saw last time, was like a hybrid option between the armor stone, so the infill, and then putting steel out half of it. So you're just jetting it out a little bit with steel, and that comes in about 7.8. So you can see the three big options outside of the infill are all coming in around the price. Their useful life are very similar. The infill is probably 70 years. When you get into the steel and concrete, you're probably closer to 50 based on the engineering assessments. But right now, we want to hear from the public, you know, what makes sense? The lower one, $2 million less? Or do you really like the kind of feel of our wharf? Our downtown is our bread and butter of our beauty of St. Andrews. We have lots, but it is primarily the place that a lot of people go. And does putting in a bunch of armor stone take away from that? I don't know. Over to the public to give feedback.
A lot of the people who came out to the first consultation last night were major stakeholders in the wharf. We had some commercial fishermen who use the wharf 12 months of the year. Whale watching enterprises that a good portion of their year is day to day, multiple trips to the wharf. So the amount of time it takes is also a big consideration. I know those of us who just enjoy it recreationally, to lose it for a year would be a little bit inconvenient, but for some people it could take away an entire season. Can you speak a little bit about how timing plays into the decision you might make? I know some are maybe a 6-month restoration process, while others can go to a year or even longer.
Yeah, so it's a very, very good question, actually. So it does come into play. So the time frame, depending on which option you select, goes from 6 months, they say, to a year. But let's be realistic. We all know that major construction projects like these can go over time. So to say that it could be 14 or 16 months for some of these options, I think it could happen. So you're really in a situation with what are the impacts on our community if we were to lose a season at the wharf. If you're a whale watching company, that is your bread and butter. If you're a tour boat operator, it's your bread and butter. But I will also say that perhaps we could look at options. It's just the approach that's being redone, but maybe there's still an option to get to the end of the wharf. So even if one of these other options is selected, what if there's a little ferry that got you down to the end of the wharf and you could still access it? So I don't know all the answers to that, but those are all conversations that once we look at which option's best, that we should talk about it, because it's really filters. It's what does the public prefer, but it's also the filter of feasibility. Mm-hmm. And we financially, we do think we could do them all, with the exception of maybe the rehabilitation, because at that point you're paying $5 million to rehabilitate it for 10 to 15 years. But I think all options are on the table, but I gotta wonder how many operators and things that use the wharf, how they would survive if that wharf wasn't available. And I know what are the long-term impacts when St. Andrews isn't circled, and I'll keep going to the whale watching example. Mm-hmm. If St. Andrews is circled as a place you don't go to whale watch, maybe another community is. So it's got to be all weighed out, and that's why we're looking forward to hearing from the public. But it's important to note that, the stakeholders that are down there are definitely engaged, but the resident of St. Andrews, this is a significant amount of debt the town is incurring to do this project. So you should weigh in. And one of the questions is do you think we should be spending this money? I think we heard overwhelming last time that we should, but it's important to make sure that we are hearing from the public because they are paying for it.
I know from being there last night, another reason why these kind of events are important is that I actually changed my mind. I'm not going to tell the public which one I put as my number one.
But will you tell me at least at the end of this?
I'll tell you at the end of this. I filled out a form. I did fill out a form, and I numbered 1 to 3 because when you have that opportunity to talk to everyone from Greg Beckerton, who fishes there 12 months of the year, to Roger McNabb, who's part of the yacht club, to hear the point of view of everyone in our community who I go down the wharf every night with my dog just for a walk, but it's a huge part of my daily life. But to hear everyone's perspective on how each option would impact them. It actually, I went back and got my form and read over them because when I thought about it, and also if you stare at the pictures long enough, you can really start picturing, okay, what will that actually look like in our community? But one of the factors that I guess I can't quite visualize yet is when it comes down to cost. When, let's say, I think you call it the infill, the first option is just over $6 million.
Correct.
6 months, I think, timeline,
Correct.
if I'm correct, on that, versus something like the steel option. Also looks beautiful, and I know they can add some aesthetics to it to make parts of it look more like wood. I'm just wondering, when it comes to that $2 million difference between that option, and let's just talk about money for this instance and not the time impact, because I think the steel option was a year. About 12 months.
A year, yep.
So that's another consideration. But when it comes to that $2 million, what does it mean for the taxpayer if we go with, let's say we did go with the steel option, it's $8 million. How would I feel that versus the $6 million option?
You could calculate it out, and when the options are kind of selected, that's what we'll do. But the reality is you're amortizing this over the life of the wharf. So your debt isn't just incurred that year, your debt's multiple years. So per household, it's actually not a big dollar amount, but in the same sense, I never want to get complacent when the town's borrowing extra. In this case, it would be only about a third of it, and in theory about 30% of it. It's not $2 million extra that we have to incur. We're 30% of it, so about $600,000 in that case extra. So you amortize that over the length of it. It's not a big number, and that's really it. So I guess the real question is, when you're looking at the design, money is a factor, yes, but it should be a little bit weighed out at what do you want your downtown to look like, and that's primarily it. But also, these weather events are happening more and more. So what is more durable? Just because something's useful life is 50 or 70 years doesn't mean it lasts that. It could be 30. It could be 80. You just don't know, right? And if you look at the end of our wharf, we're okay right now, but 4 terms later, the mayor of the day will probably be hopefully sitting on the CHCO couch with who knows what the camera quality will be like. That'll be incredible. But they'll be discussing how they fix the end of the wharf. So you really need to look at the big picture and the short picture on what we should do. But when you break it down per household over the course of the life of the loan, it's not a big number by any means.
And one thing that I shouldn't overlook is the idea that Market Square will change a lot too. Can you speak a little bit to that point and why climate change is a factor in the funding that you're getting for this project? Obviously, when you live this close to the water, we can all see it and feel it in our own ways.
We can. So I believe it was 2020, we had that storm where Market Square flooded. It literally, so did the point. All the debris was across the road. You couldn't see the road anymore. But so Market Square will actually be expanded a little bit. So there'll be some fill brought in there, but it will also be raised. So that's an important note in this project is you are going to see the wharf be a meter higher. So it's going to actually, that approach is going to be higher, then it's going to dip down a little to get to the old wharf. And we need to do that for the long term. If you look at the rising sea levels, that is the projections that has to happen. And that's how we were able to get the funding. And the downtown, again, it's a beautiful view, but it will be raised about a meter higher. The rest of the square will eventually be raised with it is the goal. But it will alter your view. But the reality is no one likes to do this, but the alternative is not a measure either, because if we don't do something, it's literally going to flood or erode. So we need to protect our downtown core. And if you look at our projections on how rising sea levels impacts the town, there's a number of areas that are exposed. That is one of the key ones, and it's such a used area that we want to protect that. But Patrick Street is on that. The point itself is on that, and even on the backside, it's fine. There is the good thing about some projections is like our sewage lagoon or treatment, that is all inside of it, so it wouldn't be impacted even if we didn't do anything per se. But to fix the climate change to meet the demands of what the future is, the municipality is going to have a very, very hard time meeting that with the amount of funding it will require. So when we have a window to fix a major asset that's expired, the wharf this isn't something that we're just doing for climate change. There is a weight restriction right now on the wharf. If we don't do anything, we're going to lose that wharf. So the fact that we're able to raise it a meter to last the community longer and leverage funding, it thankfully Thankfully, it's actually the good news when it comes. Climate change isn't necessarily a good thing. Rising sea levels aren't necessarily a good thing. I know it's happened over time, but the reality is the fact that there's funds available, that when our wharf is expired, I'm so thankful, because if it wasn't, maybe we'd be having a conversation, can we afford to do this on our own, which we probably couldn't.
What will be the timeline for the project? When can we expect it to start? And I know there's obviously, for people impacted, planning that goes around where they set up their business for the construction period.
So when it starts will probably be a little bit dictated by what options pick, depending 12 or 6 months. But I think in reality, when you're going to be looking is the fall of 2024. So I again, no decisions been made, but if you're a tour boat operator or commercial fish, I think it's a safe assumption that the wharf will be status quo for this upcoming, I guess you could say, tourism season. But around this time next year, you got to think the project's going to commence. And the funding does have timelines on it. We're okay, but we do have to make a decision. Every year that goes by, the decision's not going to get easier. But it's just, a storm away, or rate restrictions can change. So council's pretty committed to going through this process, hearing from the public, taking a look at what they said, and making a decision.
Obviously, the rise in the costs for the wharf project is a good segue to talking about affordable housing. As we've seen in the past few years, just prices skyrocket in terms of the cost of living. This town has taken a proactive approach to affordable housing in the community, and you broke ground last week with your partnership with Compass Housing. I'd love for you to just highlight where we're at with this affordable housing project and why it's so significant.
So one thing, when we all ran, they're all in CHCO, and I know I've referenced this to you before, but everybody that ran for council said housing, housing, housing. And I'm really pleased to say that all members of council and this is the general election, all members of council have lived up to that, and we've even added 3 new councillors that it's a focus for them as well. But what's significant is there's a number of communities in New Brunswick that have been trying to find affordable housing, and it's been really, really tough. There is some good examples out there. If you look in the Fredericton area with tiny homes and some communities, but in rural New Brunswick, there hasn't been a lot of successes for affordable housing. So this was a very aggressive approach by the town of St. Andrews and the council of St. Andrews to make a difference. And Compass Housing is significant because it is 42 new units, and those are ranging from 1 bedroom right up to 3 bedrooms that are, again, not low income, but affordable housing. And that range goes from $950 to $1,500. Now, $1,500 being 3 bedrooms. So 3 young workers or 3 college students could each rent a room and have a place in our community. So it's affordable is important, but so is inventory. We don't have a lot of apartments in our community. It doesn't meet the demand. And there's actually studies that show that if you're able to get to 5% vacancies, it'll keep everybody, and I'm not saying they're dishonest, but it keeps everybody honest, where you can't charge whatever you want because there's a market that people have other options. Right now, your unit might be not as nice as one, but you can still get top dollar because there's no other option. So the fact that Compass Housing was made possible by local developers that, Tressa Bevington grew up in St. Andrews. She's very involved in a number of events still, comes home a lot. And of course, the Ingersolls, they're going to be project managing Gerald Ingersoll. It's significant because they were willing to lock in prices for 15 years with only inflationary adjustments, meaning that the town is a partner. We're spending a significant amount of money. There was an economic development grant for $500,000. But what that did is it secured the rates that we do. And if you divide, again, that $500,000 divided by 42 per each unit and divided by 15, it's not a big number every month to help subsidize rental rates. It makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is the payback on that investment is in about 10 years' time. So if we didn't do anything, it used to be a burnt down motel at that location. Now instead we've got an affordable apartment building, and it's bringing in tax dollars to pay for the investment. It really just made sense. And we've had some success with other developments in the community, but they've been market value. And this is the first time where these have been below market value. And I get it. Affordable is such I guess you could say a loose term. CMHC defines it as 30% of kind of your income. And when you look into New Brunswick, I think the average income now is about $45,000. Your average household income is, I believe it says $83,500. I wrote it down. So really that is such a loose term at what's affordable. But I will say when I went to UNB, I paid $400 for my room with my roommates. We each paid $400, and then we split the other bills. Well, here we are 20 years later, not to date myself, but over 20 years. My wife would probably say 23. But here we are, 500 plus split of utilities. It really is doable. If you're a young worker that's struggling to have an apartment, paying $1,000 on your own, well, find some people you work with and you've got a unit here. And then as well, I got to think of a senior citizen in our community. The cost of everything's going through the roof. Your income that you get is so fixed and what you have for pension income or whatever. This should help. So I will say that we can't build enough of these. And the town has applied for the Housing Accelerator Fund. We've applied for over $8 million in projects. I don't know what we're going to get, but I got to think that hopefully we're going to get something, and this is just the start of more affordable housing.
Great. And also ribbon cutting recently for the Van Horn Garden Homes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So Charlie and Colleen Bourgeois have started their first rental units are actually filled this week. They've got their first 6 units, and that is townhouses. They're 2-bedroom. Hannon Construction built them. They're beautiful homes right in the corner of Bar Road and Mowat Drive, and they've just if you go by now, you'll see that they're actually starting to lay the foundation for the next unit. So they're underway. They've already got the ones that they're building right now rented, and the ones that are completed are rented. So there's lots of demand there, and they've got new residents that have moved in there, but they've also got some people that are looking to downsize their home. So all signs are pointing ahead. And then of course we also have by the entrance of Kingsbury Garden, we have townhouses there. So there's I don't recall having 3 developments actually being built at one time in our community, but we need it. And I will say short term is yes, people are struggling right now, but long term we need it. And I don't really speak about this often, and I don't want to make it dark, but the reality is that we have an aging population in New Brunswick, and in rural New Brunswick it's even higher. So baby boomers, they have been carrying us for so long. The reality is in 15 years time, they are the biggest clump of our population. Unfortunately, we're going to start losing. So what you're going to see in about 15 years time is rapid population decline in New Brunswick. So we have an opportunity right now to grow, to get more residents, to get more people to live here, get more people to stay here because they can afford to. So right now we need to hold or grow our population knowing that's going to happen, because in 15 years time, everyone's going to be sitting around saying, oh, we're getting smaller. And we do know that the services we have in rural New Brunswick, if we lose population, that's when they look at hospitals, they look at schools. So we need to have a long-term vision, and that's why these housing developments are so important, short-term and long-term.
Can you talk a little bit about how that's impacting the tax base for the community, and also how housing assessments are impacting that?
Yeah, so that's another fair question. So if you look at the cost of everything, every engineering assessment that we've done to do a project this year, unfortunately the engineering assessment has been way under. We had to cut projects. The reality is things are costing more and more, and we've seen it in the assessments, which is not done by your town council, but our assessments the last couple of years have gone through the roof. My personal assessment in 3 years went up, I think 42%, or 2 years, 42%. It only goes up 10% a year. You might go up that much, but they can only increase your taxes 10% a year, but they are backlogged. So meaning mine, I already know are going up 10% this year because the assessment went up over 20% last year. So the assessment base of the municipality is going to be over 10% this year. And that's because of the assessment base catching up, but also new construction. So how do we combat everything going up in cost as a municipality? Well, without doing it on the back of the existing taxpayer, you need new taxpayers, new growth, and that's the healthiest way to budget it. The town of St. Andrews, whenever we do a budget, we're almost every year hope to grow our tax base about 5%. That is the multiple year plan. Right now it's been above that, and that's why you're seeing our tax rate, our mill rate in St. Andrews go down, is because we need growth, but it needs to be sustainable. But I will say that right now 5%, if we only grow our tax base 5% versus last year, it's a budget cut because inflation's up almost 7%, right? So 5% doesn't cover the cost of what's gone up over the last year. It's a tough time, to say the least, with everybody, everywhere you turn, everything costs more.
We just have about 1 minute left today, Brad, if you can believe it. I'd love to talk a little bit about what's to come. I know we have Christmas by the Sea coming up, but we just had a very successful Indulge weekend.
Yeah, Christmas by the Sea, I know yourself and a lot are active doing some incredible stuff. And actually more and more people are talking about Christmas by the Sea as a great time of year to come to St. Andrews. And a lot of the activities year after year starting to build up. Every year there's new ideas, so it's exciting. But Indulge was the last kind of, I guess you could say, big weekend of St. Andrews. It was the biggest and most successful we've ever had. Looking forward to the near future due to Tressa Bevington again. She was the coordinator, announcing how much that's going to be. But the big difference this year is New Brunswick Tourism got involved. They were a new partnership. They allowed us to put the tent in the downtown on Friday night that people loved. It was busy. Allowed us to add more vendors to our downtown. Sold 30% more tickets. And in general, there was more musical acts because the tent was there and they were such a good partner. So from my understanding, New Brunswick Tourism has already signed up for next year, so we can expect bigger and more things. And of course, you know, when you have partners like that, it allows you to take more risk. The last thing you'd want to do is take risk and lose money and not give a donation to the food bank. But yeah, really optimistic that this is the most we've ever raised. And we'll do that in partnership with the Lobster Trap Christmas Tree at Christmas by the Sea time.
Thanks so much for being here today, Brad.
Thank you.
My guest today has been the Mayor of the Town of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Your Town Matters.